Hi guys, so this is the second part of my WEB701 Milestone free demonstration. So we're going to look at the Vue web application this time. So following straight on from our last video, so you can see my Express API service is installed, it's running. I have a database here. It has all my dummy data. So following straight on from that previous video, you should have all of this stuff in place. Okay, so we go to my GitHub. Again, the link for this GitHub is in the report submitted for Milestone free. So, and again, a overview of the application, a list of the features that the application has and some guidelines about installing and running it, all available in the README. So again, basically your first step is to clone a copy of this repo to your local device. Once you have that in place, then you'll need to open it using something like VS Code. Again, you just want a code editor that has that integrated terminal. Okay, so we've got a blank window. We're just going to open. Again, navigate to wherever you have installed your copy. Select the folder. Okay, cool. So this is the right stuff. Excuse the mess. Just tidy that up. Okay, so to get this up and running, and of course it probably looks a bit intimidating straight off the bat, we're just going to use npm run serve, and essentially we're just going to use the built-in development server under Node to kind of run this Vue application. Awesome, so you can see it's just doing an initial compile. Okay, now that it's up and running, it hasn't automatically opened, but that's easily fixed. So we'll just control click on that, and bear with me for one moment, and here we are. So this is the Vue web client. Now, as you can see, straight away on the home page, we've got our dynamic content in terms of we've got this slider here, just displaying images. So we'll just touch on the code briefly. Okay, so we want the home page. Here we are. So it's actually, I'm using an SDK called Bootstrap Vue, and so these B HTML elements, B row, B carousel slide, these are all coming out of Bootstrap Vue, but the actual components I've built myself. So you can see we just we have a carousel, we have an interval for the slides, and then we have our various actual slides that have some text and a heading and an image reference. Got a bunch of those there, obviously. So yeah, that just kind of does its thing. It could be configured much more, but of course time is always the issue, so it's just pretty basic. Okay. So yeah, so we have that as dynamic content. Everything else is reasonably basic. We've got lots of lorem ipsum going on. Though most of these links, of course, will actually take you places. I can't stand using dead links. So to give you an idea, we've got a home page that has the slider, a statement of what the company is and does, the links to various pages, the growers page, the auction page, the news page, things like that that you would want to immediately engage customers with on your home page. So the about page, again, we've just kind of have things, statements, contact information, affiliate links, things like that. And when we get into growers, this is more interesting. So these are actually being pulled in from our database. So I'm using a GET request to hit the Express API service and to get this information, and then I'm using this to basically do a loop, and for every grower that I've pulled out of my database, I'm creating one of these elements here. So what does that look like in the code? Just jump on in. So we go to our growers page. The actual HTML looks something like this, and this is where the interesting stuff's happening. So this V4 here is essentially, this is the loop. So I'm basically, when the page loads, I get all of the growers in my database by using a method. Bear with me for one moment. Get growers. So you can see here I'm firing off to my localhost free get growers. So that's the Express API service, and then the response I'm popping into a data object called growers, the response data. You can see there's growers there, just defined as an empty array. And then in the actual sort of view, I'm doing this loop through the growers array, and I'm basically putting every item into it, into an individual grower. And then basically for every grower, I'm getting another one of these sort of cards here, which, you know, contains the grower name and their bio and such. So you can see, so yeah, so that information, the name, the bio, that's all literally coming out of the database. And I'm doing very similar things with the auctions page. These are all existing auctions in my database there. And again, I'm doing a similar thing on the page load. I'm grabbing all of the auctions, and then I'm literally just looping through those auctions to generate all of these individual tiles. And doing a very similar thing on varieties. Again, I'm grabbing all the varieties, and then I'm just looping through them and rendering up all these tiles for the individual ones. Now, I haven't quite got there, but say for example, growers, if I click to learn more about an individual grower, this would be the individual growers page with their specific information. Unfortunately, I just haven't had time to fill these out, but you can see that is their name. I am actually pulling in that data, and if you want to look at the code in your own time, you can see that essentially what I'm doing is when I make this click here to go from the growers page to the grower page, I basically grab this chap's username and save it into what's known as local storage, and I then use that on the grower page to pull in his individual information. So this is where the sort of get users, get user from the Express API service come into play. So yeah, so similar functionality on growers, auctions, and varieties. So they're all doing the same thing. You'll see we don't really have anything, but we are pulling in that information. And if I had more time, I'd be able to use it to kind of fill these in and more pretty. But of course, we have to be logged in to actually view these ones. Okay, so news, again, it's just kind of a placeholder page. Contact, again, just a bit of a placeholder page. So the more interesting stuff actually kind of happens when we actually log in. So if we go into our login, now from here we can log in or we can register. Register, of course, creates a new user. For the moment, I'm just going to log in as one of my existing users out of the database there. Let's see. And of course, Lisa's details are actually on the GitHub there, just as an example for use. So if we log in, ooh, maybe my name was incorrect. Let me see. I see. I actually made a wee typo there, but that's great. You got to see the actual authentication and work there. An incorrect password or username generated a login fail, but the correct credentials, just don't want to say, basically bring us into the dashboard so we can see all of Elisa's details here. And if we like, we can actually go in and edit her details. So let me see. Just for fun, very exciting. So we're just going to update the first name. That's worked. We can see first name's updated. Now to just see that that is actually happening in the database, we're just going to go to the user table, and I just, whoops. There we go. We can see the test where we've changed the first name there. Make it nice and obvious. Don't edits. Again, I'll just update. That's all successful. Now, if I look at my database again and just refresh it, you can see these changes taking effect directly here in the database. Excuse me. Okay, now that we're actually logged in as one of our users, we've got our dash here now. Because Lisa is just a very standard user, she doesn't actually have a lot of functionality, but she would be able to, in a perfect world, view these auctions, which before you didn't actually have the option of viewing the auction. That button was hidden and we had a bit of text instead. But as she's a member, she should be able to view an auction. And again, you can see the data is here, but I just have not had the time to actually kind of make it into a full page. Now, so we're just going to log out for Lisa. Log out will clear and take us back to the login. So there's actually a few things that go on under the hood there, and again you'll see on auctions, since I'm logged out, I can't actually get into auctions now. So basically, how does that all work? So if we jump into the code and go to auctions, now on my auctions page, go down to our logic. I've got a few methods running. Now, one method is a login check. So I basically check if I have this user ID set into local storage. If I do, and that's done at the point of login, if that's true, then certain things will show. If it's false, then again, some things will or won't show. So that's on most pages, just as a kind of a default way to make sure that I have a user logged in. If a user is logged in, then the login button is not available for them. They couldn't log in twice, for example. The log out button becomes visible. So things like that were just for usability. Now on some of the pages, such as the dashboard here, I take it a step further where I actually have this authentication checker. And basically, if there is not a user ID, i.e. this user is not logged in, not only will I not show them the things like the log out and the dashboard, but I will literally kick them off this page, however they managed to get there, straight back to the login page. So that means in a scenario where somebody, say, entered a specific route into the browser's address bar and went into some of the sort of restricted areas, they would not be able to get in there. They would immediately be booted straight out to the login page, and probably ideally with a message saying, "Oh, sorry, you're not logged in, please log in." Now, just to show a bit more of the functionality, I'm going to log in again. This time I'm going to log in as one of my users who is a member of the group and has more privileges than just a standard user. And again, the username and the password are on the GitHub repo there. Though, of course, all of these users and their passwords are all here, just under the user table in my database. It's all clearly visible. So you can see username, password there. So you can absolutely feel free to play around with all the different users. They're all supported. And you'll just see this value, excuse me, this value here, the got apples member, essentially is a Boolean value, true, false. So some of these members Colin and Fitz here, for example, are Got Apple members and will have elevated privileges, and some such as Helen, Kellen, and the edited Lisa all are just regular users. And so essentially all they can do is at this stage they have an account, they can edit their details, they could potentially view and bid on auctions and things like that, whereas the actual users have the additional ability to create auctions. So just to see that in action, so we're just going to log in as Colin. Again, you can see we're successful in our login. Okay, now because Colin is a member, you can see we've got additional functionality. Members are growers, of course, so they have orchards. So this is the orchard associated with Colin there. Now they also create auctions, so we can see these are the auctions that Colin has running. So you can see there's various information there. This is just kind of somewhere he could refer to these auctions. And if we want, we can actually create a new auction. So just to give us a proof of concept, we've got a few auctions going on here, yada yada yada. Now if I go into my dash and I go to create a new auction, let me see, just make it nice and obvious. This is a test auction going on here. Now, if I try and create an auction and I don't fill in any of these fields, I'm immediately going to get error messages telling me I haven't selected this, that, or the other. Let's do Golden Delicious for fun. And again, you can see, no weight values. So I've used that kind of validation technique on pretty much any forms that I'm giving my users access to. We'll give it a apply now and hire, delivery, a couple of dollars. So essentially all my fields are filled in. This should work. We've created an auction. Now if I go to the auction page, here's our auction that we've just created. So it's automatically found itself an image based on the variety that's been entered. And there's a bit of our information. We can see that buy now is available and delivery is available. If they weren't, they would come up with unavailable. So yeah, so that's just kind of loosely how a user can create an auction. Of course, there's more to it under the hood than that. But now, in terms of one of the requirements was to have some form of calculator. So I've created this calculator here on my create auction page. Now, essentially, what this is doing is it's giving my user an ability to see what the average price is per weight for the various varieties of apples. So, say if my user wanted to create an auction for, let's just say Bajud, and he wanted to, perhaps he just wanted to get the price per kg, calculate that. So the price per kg is $1.61. Now, how am I working this out? Well, this is where I'm actually using some of those more complicated routes from the Express API service. So here in the create auction page, which we were just on, I'm grabbing the average reserve and the average weight of those apples based on the apple name that I'm passing through. In this case, it was Baju. Then I'm basically going through, and if I don't have any empty tables or any null values there, then essentially I'm just saying take the average price, divide it by the average weight, then times that by how much weight my user has entered in their calculator, and then generate that up as the total. Now, it works quite well, but it's not a perfect system because I do have a couple of apple varieties. You'll see we've got all our varieties here. Now, a couple of these, we don't actually have any current auctions for them. Essentially no auctions have been made using them yet. So it's impossible to actually get an average for something that doesn't exist. So I believe That's Bramley's seedlings. So when I try and calculate this reserve, essentially I'm pulling in null values because there is no auctions to refer to. So I should just get a average unavailable or a similar sort of message. So you can see we've got none available. Is it a bug? Well, it would work if we actually had auctions to refer to. So which we would in a real world scenario. It's just I haven't had time to build that dummy data in. But as it is, it's relatively robust. I can jump between the various if they don't exist. Say, I don't think Tideman's Late Orange exists. Then it's just going to say unavailable. It's not going to actually break the calculator or anything like that. Oops, that's right. Apparently it wasn't available, but Golden Delicious is. So yeah, so it's just kind of one of those things. So if I was to create an auction for 10 kgs of Golden Delicious, calculate that, then I would know on average other growers are charging $26.50 for that, and I could decide mine are particularly good. I'm actually going to make my auction for a higher reserve amount than that, or I might think mine are a bit average. I'm going to make it a lower reserve amount than that. But either way, so that's essentially how my calculator is working there. So yeah, I think that probably roughly covers the functionalities. So yeah, regular users can view auctions, and unfortunately, I didn't have time to implement users bidding on auctions, but of course, that would be the next step of that process. And members have the ability to create auctions. Both regular users and members both have the ability, as you can see here, to edit their account details, so they could change their name. I do not actually allow them to edit their password and username. It's one of those ones. I don't think in a real world scenario I would do that in general. If somebody needed to change a password or username, I would probably require them to contact the administrator to actually do that in a more restricted kind of manner, because it very much has the potential to cause me trouble in my database. And similarly, users cannot just give themselves membership privileges. This doesn't work at the moment, but essentially this would be a flag that would, in full implementation, would essentially send my administrator an email saying, you've got a user called Colin McDonald who has requested membership privileges, i.e. the ability to create auctions. Now, again, I don't really consider that a bug. I think in a real world scenario, I would actually want to have some clear validation that this person was actually a grower. I wouldn't want users to just be able to give themselves those sort of elevated privileges. So they probably would need to contact me. I would need to actually verify that they did have an orchard and that they were selling apples and did meet the criteria of the users. So again, not totally a bug, but something that I would have liked to have had fully implemented. But again, time has been the issue this semester. Um, yeah, so that basically sums it up. I'm just thinking, is there anything? Again, I won't really go too deep into the code with you because there is a lot of code there to kind of go through. So it would be a very time consuming process for me to walk through all of this with you. But some of the interesting things that I'm kind of doing here is I'm doing a lot of what I would call conditional rendering, where I'm sort of using these statements like, okay, so if a login status is false, then show a login button in the menu, which would look like. So if I just log out, okay, so my login status is not true, and so that button there is visible, and you can see that's a conditional rendering going on. Which page are we on? Homepage. Of course, it's the same for all pages. But then if the login status was true, well, then we show a dash button instead, and we show a logout button instead. So these things are often there, but they're often just kind of hidden depending on what information is coming in. And say, for example, on auctions, sorry, bear with me a moment as I just find it. Aha. So this is our little tiles on the auction page, just to go back. So all these little tiles which are pulling in the data with a GET request. So then to display it, I'm doing things like, where are we? So here, for example, if login status is false, then I'm hiding the, basically hiding the, giving a bit of text, but essentially I'm, telling the user that they need to log in to view it, and I'm hiding that button unless they're actually logged in, then they can access that button. Or, for example, what else have we got here? Say for example, okay, so if the auction has a buy now that exists, it's greater than 0, so it exists, then you can show that buy now is available. Whereas if, else if their auction equals 0, i.e. it does not exist, then you'd show buy now is unavailable. So a lot of things like that. Let me see, maybe on dashboard. I might even be taking that to the next level somewhere. Oh, I know. View options potentially. So this is getting even more clever again. So on this scenario here, okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm putting a template tag into my HTML essentially. Now, the template is a non-rendering tag. It doesn't actually affect the view at all, but it is somewhere where, if you're clever, you can put in some conditions. So basically, I've encased this whole buy now and buy now amount in this template. So essentially what I'm doing in this scenario is I'm saying, okay, if I have a buy now on this auction, then cool, I will show that I've got the buy now available, and I'll also show the amount for the buy now, all covered by this one sort of templated condition. But on the other side, if it doesn't exist, I'm just going to show it as unavailable, and I'm not going to show a price at all. So the price would only be visible if the buy now was available, then I'd include the price. Otherwise, no. And I can do I've done exactly the same here with the delivery. And so if you have delivery, yay, you've got a price. If you don't, no price is visible. I'll just see if I can find an example of that in action. Sorry, we'll just log back in as a user. Okay, so we're just going to view his auctions. Okay, so delivery is available, so we have an amount. Buy now is available, so we have an amount. Now, do I have, so here delivery is unavailable, so I'm not even displaying that amount at all. So yeah, it's kind of something that I find really helpful in terms of controlling the data that's coming in and how users can interact with it. Just with those sort of simple conditions, you can do quite a bit with yeah, just sort of how you display data, how you control people's access to it by, are you logged in? No, you're not. You can't see this. You can't access this. So yeah, really, really cool. Kind of one of my one of the things that I've quite enjoyed about doing the sort of more front end development with this with Vue here. Anyway, I think that pretty much sums it up, folks. So have a good play and enjoy.